Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the Rules Supplement Tap, Untap, Burn 5-color mana spell point variant rules core mechanics designed by Kearney with Hiten, Dave, Justin, Johnston, and Carcas for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Wizard Princess, Christopher, Dave, By Inspection, Star, Loverly, and gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos, Did, Vicente, Gilberto, Shane, K, Cert, 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lion, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Skalenia, Nick, and Party McButterpants. Thank you all very much for your support. Tap, Untap, Burn is not the first Magic the Gathering rules variant for spell casting that I have reviewed. Magic the Gathering is more intertwined with D&D than ever before. Obviously, they're both produced by the same company. But we've had, in 5th edition, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica and the Mythic Odyssey of Theros. So we have entire game settings being adapted to D&D, so it's not really a surprise that we have folks that want to adapt the game mechanics of Magic the Gathering into D&D. That is a difficult undertaking because D&D is so closely married to its spell slot level system. However, there is a good way to start with that, which is what this supplement does, which is beginning with the spell point variant rule, which is already in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Page 288 offers a variant to eliminate spell slots and instead replace them with spell points, which each spell level, you basically convert your spell levels that you would get, spell slot levels, into these points, and there's a certain math ratio. First level spells are worth 2 points, second level spells are worth 3 points. I believe it ties into how sorcery points are given that math as well. And it basically unlocks some flexibility for casters and allowing them to cast different levels of spells without necessarily having just, hey, you've got 4 first level spell slots and 2 second level spell slots. Instead, it's instead you've got 8 points, and instead you could cast 4 second level spells if you wanted to, and then no first level spells. So it gives you some flexibility there. The problem with that system is an entire class is pretty much built around doing that already in 5th edition, which is the sorcerer, using the sorcery points. They can kind of already convert spell slots, and including lower ones and higher ones and that kind of thing. So that, while I'm in favor of losing some of that spell slot level restriction, it does kind of step on the toes of the sorcerer. This one also just expands on that system by saying, okay, what if we used spell points, but all of those points were also one of the 5 mana colors from Magic the Gathering. So we're eliminating the 8 spell schools from D&D. No more evocation, illusion, necromancy, etc. And we're going to replace them with white, black, blue, red, and green. It's been a while. I played Magic the Gathering back in the 90s. I was at the perfect age. I believe it was 93, 94. And I was just super into it at the time, played it throughout the 90s, and then just kind of dropped off as the years went by. So I do have history with Magic, but I haven't probably even looked at a card in 10 years. Which brings me to one of my points I want to make, which is how odd some of these D&D spells have been assigned to different colors. So first of all, I want to mention as a really brief complaint, this is way too wordy of a title. You don't need variant rules and core mechanics in the same thing, let alone the same. I mean, this is like 2 different subheadings. Tap, Untap, Burn is using language of Magic the Gathering. So anybody that's familiar with Magic will instantly know what this is about. But then it's good to have a subheading to explain, well, what does that actually mean? But there's just too much here. That's my opinion. The book is full of really great art. I will say that. This cover page and then the artwork throughout is absolutely incredible, and I feel that jealous rage whenever I see somebody who is both a good writer, designer, and a good artist, which apparently is what the designer is showing off here, is their ability to create Not only a decent supplement, one that I have some issues with, which we'll get into, but you'll notice as I flip through these pages, really incredible artwork that is, frankly, just stunningly great, which is really fun to see. So as I mentioned, it builds off the spell point system. Each of the chapters in here is a successive variant rule. So it starts off saying, okay, we're going to use the spell point variant rules from the Dungeon Master's Guide, but we're going to make them a little bit easier to work with by having it just be a 1-to-1 ratio. So instead of it being this weird first is 2 points, second is 3 points, first level is 1 point, second level is 2 points, third level is 3 points. Great. That's already improvement in my book. That's fantastic. The math doesn't quite work out, however, if you look at the chart here, because at first level, full spellcasters have 2 first level spell slots, whereas here it says you get 3 mana to begin with. So that's 3 first level spells. Now, every once in a while, it does line up. Usually, on the levels, you get access to new spell levels. So, but it just kind of seems to average out, where it just gives casters that much more power. And this is a running theme throughout this entire supplement: is giving casters more power, more flexibility, more options. And that's not something I think spellcasters necessarily needed. I would include the caveat that if you're going to use these rules, maybe use them in a campaign of all spellcasters, specifically like all wizards. You know, you want to play all planeswalkers or something, like all wizards. That could probably work. But if you're using this system because you want to make your 1 or 2 spellcasters have more abilities, if I was a non-full spellcaster class, I would be like, well, what the hell? Like they're given a lot more power, a lot more flexibility, a lot more options, and just more spells in general because of all of these rules. I do like how each chapter is a different variant rule, so it ends up being kind of variants within variants. You can kind of choose when to stop or pick and choose which ones you want to use. That part works well, and that's kind of in keeping with 5e's entire mentality, which is keep everything modular, pick what, grab what you want, leave what you don't want. It's just the buffet style rules, which is great. I think that works very well. And this supplement does that. But every single rule is in service, seemingly, of making spellcasters that much more powerful. So we're using the spell point system. We're using, I think, a better version of it, although one that gives spellcasters more options. And then every mana that you choose, so again, on this level, every time you level up and gain more mana points or spell points, you have to choose what color they are, which is one of those colors from Magic the Gathering. Now, this is where it gets confusing for me because, again, I thought I had a good handle, even though I haven't played Magic in forever. I thought I had a good handle on the themes and elements of each of the colors. I mean, from what I can remember, just spitballing, white was defense, restorative, radiant, protection, buffs, that kind of thing. Blue was enchantment, mental abilities, counterspelling, that kind of thing, instant spells. Black was death, undead, acid, decay, all that good stuff. Red was destructive magic in all its force, whether that was, fireballs or lightning bolts or anything else, or earthquakes or something. And then green is anything to do with like pure nature and life, basically. So that's what I remember. Going into that, I was very confused by how some of these spells ended up in certain categories. I don't know if there was an effort to try to balance out the colors, because obviously going from 8 spell schools, which I never looked and seen what the charts are by school. I don't know if those are balanced either in terms of by total spell level across all classes. But going from that to 5 color classes changes things up, and clearly they're not all even, although it gets decently close. But some of these assignments are very, very strange. Like, for example, let's just look at first level. Black, Arms of Hadar makes sense. False Life, Hex, Inflict Wounds, Ray of Sickness, great. Sleep is a black spell. Charm Person, Command, Compel Duel, that's blue, right? Anything that does like charming or mental domination or something, that should be blue. But maybe I'm wrong, or maybe they've changed in the years and decades since. But I thought that stuff was the realm of blue magic for sure. There was some other confusion here, like Counterspell, which is the example I used for blue, and I'm pretty sure there was literally a blue spell named Counterspell in the original version of Magic, is white here, which is very, very odd. Suggestion and Zone of Truth are black spells? what? It's extremely confusing here, just glancing through this spell list. The only ones that really seem to make sense to me is green, which is all a bunch of, the plant and, conjure animals type spells, which makes sense because guess what? D&D also has spellcaster classes that are straight up nature themed classes, druid and ranger, so it makes sense that you would be able to adapt those into green fairly easily. But I take umbrage with the designer's choice of why certain spells ended up in certain areas. And I mean, that's a big deal because when it comes down to how you can cast these spells, you obviously, the mana that you have is how you choose those, what spells you can cast. But it's also a bit confusing because in the rules here, so in Magic, again, from what I can remember, in order to cast, say, a red spell, typically you have to use 1 red mana and then whatever number of any mana. It'll show it as kind of like a gray icon or something. And then higher level, more, thematically strong, whatever, those kind of spells might have multiples of that specific mana you have to pick, which kind of limits your, deck construction somewhat. Here, in order to cast spells of that color, instead of having to expend that color mana, which makes sense to me if you're using Magic the Gathering rules, instead you just have to have that mana available in your pool that you haven't spent yet. But you don't have to actually cast that color mana to cast that spell. So the example it uses says if you want to cast a 3rd level fireball, you can burn mana in any combination of color available to pay for the casting of the spell, as long as you're still spending 3 mana. But you can spend 3 green mana, you can spend 2 blue mana and 1 red mana, or whatever combination you want, as long as you have that 3 red available. And if you would spend enough mana to where you don't have 3 red available, then you won't be able to cast it next time. It's a weird system that for some reason changes. I don't know why we couldn't have just stuck with the actual Magic the Gathering system of having to spend at least 1 of that mana to cast the spell. It's an odd limitation. And then it does a slightly different rule if you want to cast higher level magic, which is anything 6th level or above. Then you do have to spend that color mana, but you have to spend all of that color mana. So it's as if you saw that icon with nothing but that mana. So for example, if you want to cast an 8th level fireball spell, you have to spend 8 red mana. So it really only comes into play for higher level spells. I mean, what level do you start even getting 5th level or 6th level spells access to, which is not till I think tier 3. Am I right about that? I'm trying to look it up right now. It seems like, I don't know. I don't understand the change here or the reason for the balancing that we're using. I will find the answer to this. So 6th level spells is 11th level, which is right at tier 3. I don't understand why we made those changes. And it does mention, I think you can only cast, similar to the sorcery points, I believe you're limited to not being able to spend too many points on just high level spells to try to balance the fact that they don't want to let you spend all those high level spells. There is a bit of a math there at the beginning, but it's an odd way of adapting the Magic the Gathering spellcasting rules into this system, and I'm not sure why those changes were in place. So I'm not going to go over each of these chapters because it's going to be way too long of a review here, but I do appreciate that because we were given a new Magic system, we had to do another pass at a lot of classes and how classes interact with spellcasting. In this case, again, it makes anybody who uses spells a lot more powerful because essentially you've got that slight restriction on having to have the colors available. Well, in this case, each of the classes have a way of kind of getting around that. So in the cleric, what the domain you chose equals the mana color that is like a wild for you in terms of casting specifically from your domain spells. So for death, it's black, knowledge blue, life is green. That actually kind of all translates pretty well. The bard can just straight up choose 1 color of mana to make wild, basically starting at 7th level. Druids, of course, green is wild for them. So it makes Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster a lot more powerful because normally you would be limited to, I believe, 1 spell school at the beginning to make it your main one. Well, there are no more spell schools. So instead, you just select a color, which means you're only limiting yourself to 1/5 of the spells rather than 1/8 of the spells. So automatically those subclasses become a bit more powerful. So I appreciate that this was added here to give kind of some more explanations and more abilities. Some of it is kind of perfunctory, like, as a paladin, you can use, obviously mana points as your divine smites because spell slots don't exist anymore. So that's, not everything is there. And the warlock, poor warlock, is just like, look, you don't actually use spell casting. You have pact magic, which is a completely different system because it just doesn't work with spell casting, as you've got your short rest stuff, and that doesn't work for spell points. So poor warlock. The wizard, of course, has to have their subclasses rebuilt because the wizard subclasses were those 8 schools of the spell schools. I was excited at first to be like, okay, we're gonna get 5 new wizard subclasses in this rules supplement. Well, yes, we do, but they're also basically just almost 1-to-1 from existing spell school. So like white magic is basically just abjuration. In fact, I think it's just straight up abjuration. And black is enchantment. Oddly enough, I don't know why we've got necromancy is a thing. Like, why am I confused about what black magic is in magic? Like, maybe I've forgotten, but it doesn't. I thought blue was the enchantment one. Instead, blue is basically a combination of conjuration and divination. They're literally just the same abilities, like picked and pulled. There might be 1 or 2 in here that are slightly different, but I do appreciate that Portent has been pushed to a 14th level. I kind of agree with the designer saying, like, you know what? Screw you, Divination Wizard. Portent is way too powerful. Every wizard goes Divination because it's so powerful because you get it at 2nd level. I want to make that a 14th level ability. I actually did laugh about that because, yeah, Portent is ridiculously powerful and probably should have been at least a 6th level later ability. 14th also probably fine, even though nobody would probably see the ability at that point. But so disappointing here until you get to green, and green, impressively enough, is basically you get druid abilities. You get wild shape at 2nd level. You get conjure animals as a free spell. You can conjure more powerful animals because, again, green just seems to translate the best, I guess, from all the from magic into D&D. And I like the fact that suddenly wizard is like a part druid because of that green magic connection. So that's the only one out of all these that actually was like, oh, okay, that was some effort given to make that a little bit more interesting. There's a section on multiclassing, which is good to have since we're redoing our spell levels. 10th level, I don't really see the reason for this. Again, spellcasters are already ridiculously powerful, and 9th level spells are already ridiculously game breaking. We didn't need 10th level spells. And we don't really get new spells here. We just get a different version of Wish, just a 10th level version of Wish, which, yeah, it's ridiculously crazy powerful as you can imagine. But otherwise, it's just like, hell, the spell slots just work like any other spell slot, just kind of continue on the trajectory of their damage increase or and it says the DM can just kind of determine if it's a time increase or something, just either double the time or keep going, make it permanent or something. But again, I don't see the reason for it, but as you can see, all of these different rules make spellcasters more powerful. It even goes a little bit further into concentration. It says, hey, you know what, spellcasters, you can concentrate on multiple spells. As long as there is some limit on your level versus how many spell levels you can maintain concentration. And the way it tries to balance that is that the concentration saving throw, which is that con save, when you get damaged, now it scales off how many spells you have concentrating, and you can trigger a concentration check save if you have to roll a saving throw, even if you succeed the saving throw. Basically, if you're just being targeted by damn near anything, you suddenly have to worry about concentration. So I'm not, the jury's kind of out on that one for me, if that ends up being a good balance or not. To me, that seems like something that should be a subclass feature rather than a new rule going forward for everybody, because being able to maintain multiple spells is very powerful. Even with the added complexity of first of all, you got limits on what you can concentrate on, and you can trigger it's harder for you to concentrate. You trigger that concentration save, that con save, more often. But that seems like something that should be a new subclass feature rather than a new rule feature. And then for tapping, which is a concept from Magic, which the concept of Magic, that's just the terminology used for spending spells. You just tap land and you can cast your spell. You gain the mana in your pool. In this case, tapping refers to the fact that when you're casting a concentration spell, you move them into the tap zone. Stay with me here. And then when the spell has been completed, either dismissed or whatever else, it goes into the burned zone, which means it's been used. Now, originally I thought, okay, what the hell is the difference between having it be temporarily tapped and then spent? Well, the difference is there are spells you can cast where called simple magic that you can untap. In other words, you can stop the spell and you get the mana back. So you haven't spent the mana. It's like getting your spell slot back. Now, the rulebook already has a rule for that. It's called ritual spell casting. It means you can cast a spell as long as you take, I think, 10 more minutes or something to cast it. And it's usually kind of spells like detect magic or, stuff that you wouldn't be doing, obviously, in the middle of combat. And hopefully wouldn't be super game breaking. The only different one here, I think, is that Featherfall you could cast as that simple magic. So originally I was like, okay, that seems, fine. I don't think that breaks any huge, balancing issues for me. But then you get to a further variant rule when a caster can essentially untap all of their specific spells. So like a druid can do that with green mana in general, or a paladin can do that, whatever their listed color is, or the domain color, their class specific spells. And suddenly it gets way more powerful. If even if you're limited to only certain spell types or colors, the fact that you can cast a spell with concentration, leave it up, and then as long as it doesn't get dispelled or you break or you lose concentration, and you can keep it up, and then you can just either stop it and get that mana back, or on the concentration front, you can also keep it going all the way up until you long rest, which is another variant rule. I forget where. I'm kind of skipping over all these rules because they're just kind of all in here. It is well organized, but there's just a lot I have to cover. Which is nuts, because that means you essentially turned all these different... What you did is you turned the Ranger, Hunter's Mark, and the Warlock Hex, which are specific spells that those classes can keep up between combat fights to try to up their, round-to-round damage, basically. I don't think it's overpowering. I think it's keeping those classes up in line with the other classes. And now you've made it so every caster could potentially keep things like haste. You could cast haste once, cast it on somebody, and then as long as you're not... you don't lose, you're not being dispelled or you lose concentration, you could keep haste on that person all day. And because of the variant rules of having multiple concentration spells, guess what? You could have multiple haste or even, a different kind of spell up. Like, it just gets real crazy real fast. The one that I was thinking of is you could conjure animals and then, use them up until there's like one animal with one hit point left or something, dispel, and then get that mana back to use the tap rules. Get all that mana back because it was a concentration spell. You used, green mana, and it wasn't dispelled, and then just recast that spell again. It gets real crazy if you want to start using all of these abilities. And I don't see any way of balancing that with non-spellcasting classes or non-full spellcasting classes. So the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, the only way I would even think about using any of these rules is if our entire party was a full spellcaster. And if it was, then that might actually be interesting, because you could have a full party of wizards, and each of those wizards could specialize in a different color of magic, and that would actually be reflected, because they would be able to cast different kind of spells more often than what other wizards could do. So that might be worth checking out, but for other classes, not so much. There are some kind of role-playing notes on, where magic can be sourced from. I do really like the new magic items, and the new NPC stat blocks are very welcome additions. I wish there were more of both, because I think they're probably the strongest part of this supplement. I mean, there's rules upon rules upon rules. A lot of them are like, wow, really? But this stuff is pretty good and really fun. And again, it just shows off the really cool artwork. I mean, look at this freaking band with the, what is that, Loxodon, the elephant, the elephant humanoid, this minotaur with a sitar, just friggin' amazing artwork. Really fun magic items that, again, kind of use the magic, the mana point system very well. And then the stat blocks at the end, which gives you an example of NPC units that use this system, although it just, it's basically like spellcasting. But what I love here is A, again, original artwork, and B, a little section on tactics, which is something I rarely see that's kind of built into this, looks like it's part of the stat block, but actually includes 2 paragraphs or 2 or 3 paragraphs of how that enemy will actually fight. They'll attempt to cast Hold Person while closing the distance, then multi-attack while maintaining magic weapon, using Smite, burning blue, then black, then green before white until the player character's feet. Talking about the mana points they're using. That's really helpful for a DM. I mean, yes, it's nice to have the little flavor text of paragraphs too, but in this case, these are kind of more, generic humanoid. They're not necessarily monsters, but I do love that we get actual tactics about how to run these particular characters. And that's pretty much the entire rules supplement. The last 20 pages or so are just the spells by class and by level. I do wish these, I appreciate these charts, but this is also probably the most unattractive version of this chart I think you could possibly produce. I don't know, you could at least have made them color coded or something more interesting here. It also highlights the fact that very much not created equal. Obviously, if you're looking at a druid, you're gonna have mostly green spells. It's just it's hard, and I get that it's hard at moving from that 5-color system to the 8-color spell school system. But still, as I mentioned, I had a big problem with where certain spells ended up. One bonus feature I do want to mention is that the supplement does include playmats, which help you keep track of your mana, including little tokens that you could print out, which are like little symbols of white mana, red mana, etc. And you could actually move them from your mana pool to your tapped mana and then put them to your burn mana. Burn for days means you can literally just keep burning mana to keep up a certain kind of spell, like a mage armor or something. You could keep that up there, and it's fun. There's different levels of this is like the printer friendly version, but there's different kinds of versions of this, and that's it's a nice effort that it's included. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the very lengthily titled Tap, Untap, Burn. Pro, new spellcasting rules are presented as variants within variants, which I think works pretty well from a readability standpoint. It's easy for me to start at the basic function of the rules and then kind of get more advanced from there. And it's easy to turn off and on certain rules that I liked and certain ones that I don't like. Pro, new magic items and NPC stat blocks that utilize the new mana system. I kind of mentioned that was honestly probably my favorite part, were the new magic items and NPCs, just because they were very well done, and I really liked the artwork used there. Speaking of which, Pro, dozens of original, incredible artwork, just really, really nice. Fun art throughout, which was nice to see. Not even trying to necessarily do the Magic the Gathering style either. The designer just has their own style that I think is absolutely fantastic. And the advantage is, like, when you're going through the NPC stat blocks, you have an original piece of art for every single NPC, which is why that looks so good. And Pro, custom player sheets for managing mana. I do really like those custom mana sheets. Cons, the ill-fitting adaptation of D&D spells into Magic the Gathering's colors. I have very much a problem with how certain spells fit into certain colors, even as somebody who is very much a lapsed knowledge base of Magic the Gathering, and maybe I'm completely wrong. Please let me know in the comments, but it's definitely more than an eyebrow raise for me. And the other con is that new rules and flexibility that are presented here, first of all, they render the sorcerer features redundant, because that's a lot of what the sorcerer can do in terms of manipulating their spell point. And that's kind of the problem with the spell point system in general. And every single thing makes spellcasters just way more powerful. Just rules upon rules upon rules of giving the spellcaster more abilities. 10th level spell slots, multiple concentration, like just turning them into huge gods, to where you really only want to be running this with full casters if everybody's cool with that. Final verdict, Tap, Untap, Burn features an intimidatingly large amount of variant rules and overpowered tuning for spellcasting that will mostly appeal to hardcore Magic the Gathering fans. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support Mark at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.